All right. The following is going to be the example presentation for your final project on civil liberties and civil rights. The topic I chose was affirmative action. The following are the Supreme Court cases, statutes, and executive orders that are relevant while conducting my research on the topic of affirmative action. There we go. Okay. So one of the relevant constitutional provisions, that's a long word, so I decided to abbreviate with the letters RCP. Obviously, the most relevant is what is called the 14th Amendment. So not in the actual Bill of Rights, but these are part of what is called the Reconstruction Amendments, Amendments 13, 14, and 15. And what the 14th Amendment made reference to was that all citizens, regardless of color, creed, or sex, are to receive equal treatment under the law. This is also called the Equal Protection Clause, and it is used a heck of a lot in legal terms, especially in constitutional cases because we, as a nation of law and order, we do want to ensure that all people receive the same treatment under the law, or at least try to get there. Obviously, in practice and reality, it is different. As many of you know, if you've ever turned on the news and looked at things like that, many of you already know that that doesn't always play out in the system. You know, there is some systemic inequities that exist that we're always trying to hopefully trying to. I know I'm a teacher, so I'm not necessarily trying, but you know, at least trying to get to a more equitable system that services everybody fairly. Another relevant constitutional provision was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Of course, in the background, you notice in that picture there's Dr. Martin Luther King standing behind LBJ while he signs the act. And, of course, you guys saw that when we watched Selma last week for your civil liberties and civil rights film. So, essentially, you know, just boiling the act down to like simple terms to understand, very straightforward, is that this means that states are unable to discriminate against someone based upon race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, too. This was passed during the Civil Rights Movement. It was, however, a culmination of many decades of racial violence and struggle. And those are things that, of course, you've learned in U.S. history previous to come and get into civics. So when it comes to that, the Civil Rights Movement, you know, there's a reason why it's called the Long Civil Rights Movement, is because it wasn't like all of a sudden in 1964 we up and decided to you know, give rights to, and God-given rights. Giving these rights is kind of an oxymoron in and of itself. And basically this was passed to try to end discrimination, racial discrimination specifically. It was a huge step forward, but we are certainly not there yet as far as treating people differently. And not differently, but treating people equally, regardless of their race, their color, their religion, their sex, national origin. We want to make sure that we're treating everybody equally. Again, a huge step forward. Obviously, though, you know, you guys know the current, you know, current events going on today. Things like Black Lives Matter movement. Of course. Protests surrounding the election and the fairness or you know, fraudulent you know, claims that are out there currently have roused protests from conservative sides and liberal side as well, you know, protesting that the election was legitimate. So these are our current things that are happening and unfolding right now, right before our eyes. And we need to make sure that we're trying to always keep these elements of equitable treatment and trying to end things like discrimination. Presidential executive orders. So JFK signed one. They just give them numbers, 10925. And this is actually the first executive order in which the words affirmative action are actually used. So that's why I found it to be important, because in some of the other executive orders, maybe written by the Obama administration or something of that, they don't necessarily mention the words affirmative action. That is, you know, 1961 is when JFK first wrote that in his executive order, and that was in reference to ensuring that the government does not discriminate against people of race, color, creed, and then added this other element of protection within jobs and employment within the federal government. Of course, you know, federal government has discriminated against people when it came to employment and things of that nature before, based upon sex, race, stuff like that, and religion too, you know. And one of the things that JFK adds to that element is to try and take away that portion of discrimination when it came to your employment within the federal government. So he added also that in there in his executive order. And then, of course, the Obama administration, another executive order, 13672, essentially did the same thing as JFK, just now for the LGBTQ community. So what JFK did, President Barack Obama did essentially the same thing when it was specific to federal employment, right? Not necessarily all things, but when it came to federal employment, that was something the Obama administration added into that executive order, right? And of course, executive orders can be done away with by the next president pretty quickly with a stroke of a pen, as was done with the transition from Obama to Trump. He, undid a lot of Barack Obama's executive orders with his own. And however, this is one of those instances, you can see this was done in 1961. Well, these executive orders have not only stood the test of time, but other administrations have decided to add to it, which lends to, this element of a wide acceptance from the standpoint that affirmative action is a good thing from an overall standpoint, right? It's certainly not without its controversy. Presentation in the next slides will kind of make mention of some of those things. But at the same time, it is something that politicians time and time again have decided that this was something that gets us closer to being a more equitable society in the treatment of its citizens. Supreme Court case. So a lot of times how affirmative action has how affirmative action has kind of come to the forefront in American society is a lot to do with colleges. So when somebody applies at a college, sometimes the affirmative action is going to be that thing that kind of kicks in because nobody's guaranteed a college education, right? That's not a guarantee you get. We guarantee an education up through high school, right, legally speaking, but when it comes to college, you're on your own. So as such, there does need to be some oversight when it comes to equitable treatment of people of, minority applicants and minority background. So Alan Backey in this Regents of the University of California v. Backey. Alan Backey, he was a white medical student. He, his application was denied to the University of California Medical School twice, despite having superior scores compared to other minority applicants that were admitted. So he sues under the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. So something I just taught you or just showed you in the previous slide. He sues under that 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause in the state of California and wins. Of course, the university does appeal it, and it goes to the federal Supreme Court. And actually, in a very, very close decision, it ended up being a 5-4 decision, that the race that race should not be the sole factor in determining admission, since it violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, Equal Protection Laws. Race should play a factor, but it should also carry equal weight with other considerations such as GPA, class rank, extracurriculars, things like that. Then later on, so that was, back in, I want to say the 1970s. Then in 1997, in the Supreme Court case of Grutter versus Bollinger, a white resident with a 3.8 GPA and a 161 on their LSAT, she was denied admission. The University of Michigan admitted to using race as a factor in the admission process. So the university used legal precedent from Backey to support their admissions policy, right? So they're using a decision that was made in the past, which is called legal precedent, right? And then they're using that in the University of Michigan to support their own admissions policy, and supporting that element of affirmative action using previous legal cases. So they actually lose at the district level. And win at the appellate level or the appeals level, which then, if you lose at the district level, it goes to a federal appellate court, and they win at the federal appellate court.
My apologies. I couldn't hear what...
Sorry, Siri went off on me. My bad. So in another very close decision, 5-4, it was actually determined that the college was operating in good faith and in the spirit of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. So another very close decision. So you see at least a couple of decisions that I've shown you are very close, which lends to the reasons why this tends to be controversial, is that because you have a lot of people on either side of the fence supporting or not supporting affirmative action, which is evident by the close decisions that we've had in the past, at least with these two examples of Supreme Court cases I'm showing you. So why is it important and controversial? And that's going to be kind of the next couple of slides. Why is this something that's important? Why is it something we need to protect? And why is it controversial? So I'm going to wrap this whole presentation up in these last two slides for you. I know I'm going well over on the time, but that's to be expected. Heck, it's a lot better than the 40-minute version that I would do if I was just doing this live and in person. Because once I get going, these are things that I love and that I'm passionate about. So I like drone on and on and on. So I'm saving you guys some time, so please watch this whole example video. Just doing some brief research, I found an article online, and I just sort of paraphrased some of the main points, which, one of the reasons why this is important and controversial is that historically, students of color have been very much underrepresented in college campuses. When we look at proportion of the population, then how much that population makes up our, higher education institutions. So historically, been very underrepresented, okay? And the diversity of people, and this is so true, I can't even tell you how important it is to have the diversity of people to enhance your cultural experience and enhance your own educational experience. Because going to small schools like the one you guys are, like in Pontiac, Illinois, it's very, racially homogenous, right? There's not going to be a large minority population in rural America. So once you go to college, you get exposed to people from different places who came from different states and urban areas and things like that. And you're going to get exposed to the wonderful culture and wonderful educational experience that those individuals had versus your own. It's a chance to branch out and meet new people that don't look like you, right? People that don't act like you, people that think differently than you. These are all wonderful things that makes America a great country. Unfortunately, I think at various times, at least recently, we have begun to look at our differences in a more of a negative light. So I'll just say that. Also, it's important in controversy because it helps promote social mobility, right? I mean, it helps promote people like moving throughout society in a good, positive way. And it also lends to a more equitable society. Like everybody, no matter their background, has an equal opportunity. So that equality of opportunity. Okay. Why does affirmative action need to be protected? And again, why is that controversial? So just kind of wrapping up those three things I mentioned just a moment ago. So the idea of America is one that should give everyone the equality of opportunity. That means that a college experience, and by extension its admissions, should strive to put people of varying social and economic classes in the same campus, while at the same time not solely and unfairly weighting race in the admissions process. This should be treated on a case-by-case basis. The reason this is controversial is precisely because it's an issue that will never be settled. We are always having to reevaluate how we look at race as a society to ensure equitable treatment of all citizens. This issue gets to the core of America's struggle with race and dealing with our past issues of race. Since there have been good arguments and mistakes made in the past in the enforcement of affirmative action, it remains a source of tension. I appreciate you guys watching this presentation. I know it went over on the minimum requirement that you have of 5 minutes, but hopefully this displays to you that you should be able to do 5 minutes in your presentation without breaking a sweat. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, you know how to contact me. I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy.